I came to collect her husband's debt. But the farmer's wife had a different offer. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind that settles over a countryside morning. This silence felt heavy, almost frightening, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The dirt road stretched endlessly ahead of me, cutting through acres of dry farmland that had clearly suffered through years of hardship. Dust rose behind my old truck as I drove toward the small farmhouse listed on the debt collection file sitting beside me. I had visited hundreds of homes during my years working for the lending company, but something about this place felt different before I even arrived. If you believe kindness can change a life and that everyone deserves a second chance, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you care about, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that hope can appear when we least expect it. I parked beside a broken wooden fence and stepped out into the hot afternoon sun. The farmhouse looked older than the photographs in the file. The paint had almost completely faded. Several roof panels were damaged. The front porch leaned slightly to one side. Everything about the property whispered the same painful truth. Someone had been fighting to survive here for a very long time. I picked up the folder and walked toward the front door. According to the records, the owner of the farm, Daniel Harper, had borrowed money 3 years earlier after a severe drought destroyed most of his crops. Then another drought came. Then a flood. Then a machinery failure that cost more than he could afford. The debt had grown month after month. Interest. Penalties. Missed payments. The numbers inside the folder looked cold and simple on paper. But standing there in front of that struggling farmhouse, those numbers suddenly felt heavier than ever. I knocked on the door. No answer. I waited and knocked again. A moment later, I heard slow footsteps from inside. The door opened. A woman stood before me. She looked to be in her early 30s, though exhaustion made her appear older. Her clothes were simple and worn. Strands of dark hair escaped from a loose braid. Her face carried the unmistakable signs of someone who hadn't enjoyed a peaceful night's sleep in years. Yet despite everything, there was dignity in her eyes. The kind of dignity that survives suffering. For several seconds neither of us spoke. She looked at the folder in my hand. Then she nodded. She already knew why I was there. The expression on her face told me she had been expecting this visit for weeks. I introduced myself and explained that I represented the company that held the loan on the property. Her eyes lowered briefly. Not in shame. More like resignation. The resignation of someone who had reached the end of every possible option. She invited me inside. The farmhouse interior was clean but painfully modest. The furniture showed years of repairs. The kitchen table had scratches and cracks across its surface. Every item inside the home looked as though it had been preserved through determination rather than money. I noticed 3 children's drawings hanging on a nearby wall. A house. A tractor. A family standing together beneath a bright yellow sun. The pictures looked hopeful. Far more hopeful than the reality surrounding them. I asked if her husband was home. The question changed everything. Her eyes filled with sadness so quickly that I immediately regretted asking. Then she quietly explained. Daniel Harper wasn't coming home. 3 months earlier, after years of financial pressure, health problems, and endless setbacks, he had suffered a fatal heart attack while working alone in one of the fields. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The file never mentioned that. According to the records, the loan remained active under the estate. The paperwork only showed numbers. It didn't show funerals. It didn't show grieving families. It didn't show children waiting for a father who would never walk through the door again. The woman introduced herself as Sarah. As she spoke about her husband, I could hear the effort it took to stay composed. Every sentence seemed carefully controlled. Every memory threatened to reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal. I listened quietly. Debt collection had never been my dream job. Life had simply pushed me into it. Years earlier, I had lost my own family farm after my father became ill. We couldn't keep up with payments. We lost everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. Now I worked for the very system that had once taken my childhood home. Most days I convinced myself that I was simply doing my job. That I wasn't responsible. That business was business. But sitting across from Sarah, those excuses suddenly felt hollow. After a long silence, she asked the question she had clearly been carrying for weeks. How much time did they have left? I opened the folder. Technically, foreclosure proceedings could begin immediately. The company had already prepared the paperwork. Everything was ready. One signature. One approval. One final step. And this family would lose the farm. The words felt impossible to say aloud. Before I could answer, Sarah surprised me. She stood up and walked toward a nearby cabinet. From inside, she removed a worn leather notebook. She placed it carefully on the table between us. Then she made an offer I never expected. She didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. Instead, she offered me something far more powerful. She asked me to see the farm before making any final decision. She wanted me to understand what Daniel had spent his life building. She wanted me to see the fields. The animals. The work. The dreams that still lived on that land. And most importantly, she wanted me to meet the children who believed they could somehow save the farm their father loved. At first, it seemed like a strange request. But something inside me said yes before logic could intervene. So I agreed. That decision would change both of our lives forever. Over the next several hours, Sarah showed me every corner of the property. The field stretched across rolling hills that glowed gold beneath the afternoon sun. The barns needed repairs. The equipment was aging. The fences required work. Financially, the farm looked like a disaster. Yet something else was visible beneath the struggles. Potential. Real potential. Daniel hadn't failed because he was lazy. He hadn't failed because he lacked skill. He had been crushed by circumstances beyond his control. As the tour continued, I met the children. Emma was 12. Jacob was 10. Little Lily was only 7. Despite everything they had endured, they greeted me with kindness. They spoke proudly about the farm. Their father's lessons. Their plans for the future. Listening to them felt like watching hope fight against overwhelming odds. That evening, after the children went inside, Sarah handed me the leather notebook. It had belonged to Daniel. Inside were years of handwritten notes. Crop plans. Financial calculations. Ideas for improving the farm. Goals for his family. Dreams for the future. Page after page revealed a man who had never stopped trying. A man who had carried impossible burdens because he loved the people around him. I sat on the porch long after sunset reading those pages. And somewhere during that quiet night, my view of everything began to change. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't looking at a debt. I was looking at a family. And deep down, I knew the choice before me was about far more than money. It was about whether compassion still had a place in a world ruled by numbers. And I had no idea that the answer would lead me into the most important chapter of my life. Story continues.